years old. Actually, I think that's where my trauma, I teach healing trauma. That's why I went through trauma, because I felt abandoned, I felt neglected. I also went through a lot of bullying because I was a bedwetter. Yeah. So
until what time?
No, until it like a few months, not till now.
I don't know, I'm just asking. When growing up, when you're 10 years old?
During that time, So
you're in boarding then?
Yeah, I went to boarding school when I was 10 years.
All right, interesting. And then so you're saying part of the trauma was that you used to wet the bed when you're 10 years old.
It's shameful, right? And also because right now it's not like that time. That time is, how could you, it's embarrassing, and then the smell, and so I faced a lot of bullying because of that. Also I felt like I went to boarding school when I was pretty young, and my older sister was there, but still I felt neglected, abandoned, and I feel that's where my childhood trauma started, when it started. So I went to boarding school, and then I went to high school, still in Kiambu, and then I went to campus, and then when I was in campus, that's when I started doing stage plays. I was in campus doing journalism.
So maybe high school, where did you go to high school?
I went to Kiambu County high school.
Kiambu High School?
St. Luke's High School.
St. Luke's High School.
Yeah.
Interesting. And going through this particular phase, what were your desires to be when you grew up during this particular phase?
I wanted to be, there used to be a journalism club in high school where, like on Fridays, the assembly, the parade, someone would come from the club and Akuja, and then they'd read the news of the week and all that. So I admired that. And then I used to watch Julie Gishuru on TV, Catherine Kasavuli, and I wanted to be like those women. So even after I left high school, I pursued journalism. Yes.
Interesting. So why did you go to campus? What did you study in campus?
I went to campus. I went to KMU, Kenya Methodist University, journalism, in journalism. Yes.
Interesting. So just growing up, you've mentioned that you had some elements of trauma, whereby maybe at 10 years you felt abandoned. What's it called? The issue of still wetting the bed back then and feeling all that particular trauma. How did your childhood shape you? Or maybe just looking back, how did your childhood shape you to who you are today?
Well, I think for a lot of us, when we go through something unfortunate, sometimes we want to jump to regret. I wish it didn't happen. But for me, I'm at a point where I've made peace with it. And I think the reason it happened was so that I can become who I am today, the coach. And so I can also talk to other women to heal their trauma, because I have healed my trauma. I'm still, healing is a long process. It's a lifelong journey to some people. So I think it has shaped who I am today. And I think I am strong, and I think I am vulnerable, and I am able to show up the way I'm able to show up because of what I went through and the lessons I had to learn and the healing I had to go through to become the woman I am today. So at the same time, even during when I was going through the boarding school, and even when I was a young girl, I always felt there was something more to me. Like I always felt I was going to be someone big, like this. And I always have had that thing at the back of my mind. Till to date.
Interesting. And also something you'd also mentioned quite earlier on, that the reason you went to boarding is because your dad relocated to Nairobi. Maybe what were your parents involved in, and how was it growing up under your parents? What are some of the elements that they instilled in you? How exactly was it?
Okay. So we were taken to, I didn't go to boarding school because we moved to the city. We were taken to boarding school because it was better education, right? In the village, you go to the village primary school. So, but as a child, I grew up, it was a very happy childhood. And I remember we were having this game with my spouse the other day where we were talking about your favorite childhood memories. And I remember, like for me, remembering what we used to do, the games we used to play with my dad. He used to bring us chocolates, he used to bring us all those things. I had a really happy childhood. I think up until I went to boarding school, and I would never take my child to boarding school, I think it messed me to some extent. It did something, a number on me. Yes.
Interesting. And what were your parents doing for a living back then? What was your dad doing? What was your mom doing?
So my parents have always been business people. My dad is a contractor, and my mom, at that time they were running a business at timber. My mom was having a timber business. My dad was in Nairobi as a contractor. So they've always been business people, so long as I've known them. At some point, my mom was a housewife, but during that time when I was going to boarding school, as a young girl, she was in business. Even back in the village, she was a farmer as well. She used to grow crops and sell them, yeah.
Interesting. And what are some of the lessons, because you grew up in an entrepreneurial family whereby both your parents were actually involved in business, what are some of the lessons that you saw from your parents that primarily have instilled, or rather have been instilled in you to date?
I think for me, first of all, consistency. Business is about consistency, because I saw my dad wake up every day, be consistent. He has done the same job since I got to know myself. Like he was at first he was a carpenter, and then he went to a contractor, and then he
graduated.
So right now he's still doing this. He lives in the States, but he's still doing the same thing. Consistency and bettering yourself. I think that's the greatest lesson I learned from him. And another thing is also during those times, even during my upbringing, there were times where finances were tight and things were not okay. And I remember he used to say, now this year Christmas is not going to be the same. Things are like this and like that. But it doesn't mean we can't have a better Christmas next year. So I learned that it's okay to go through hard times as a business person. It doesn't mean it's over for you. And seasons change, and that's part of life. But the most important part is looking at how you can get back to that place, to that good place, or to where you want to be, even in terms of profits or in terms of growing your business. So my father taught me that, actually, even when we will talk about that, when I told him I was leaving employment, I remember he told me, business is very hard. And the hard part about being self-employed is working and also getting to know where the money will come from, for the bills and for survival. So I learned I think my business skills come from my father, because my father is very resilient. He's very consistent. He's a businessman. He's a Kikuyu businessman.
Interesting. And growing up, did you have any particular entrepreneurial exploits that you tried in, maybe in high school or in primary or while in campus? Or did you have any particular intent to go into business back then?
Yeah, I remember in high school, I used to sell biscuits. Like, that it's by the carton. I used to really sell them. And then also my mother had a business where she was selling shoes. So when we used to close...
Your mother used to do everything?
Yeah. You have to sell everything. Something has to be bought.
She was a farmer.
Yeah.
She was
a farmer. Yeah. And then she started selling. She even had a salon. And at some point also had an electronics shop. At some point she had
all
an
at the same time, or just different faces?
Different faces. But some were, were running at the same time. Yeah, simultaneously.
So your mom used to do everything?
Yeah. We had no choice at our household. So when we used to close school, like there was a time she was selling